This is the world's first 240Hz 49-inch OLED monitor, and typically I'd say this is the best gaming monitor, but it's actually a whole lot more than just that. What's up everybody, welcome back to another video. So today I've got one of the most badass monitors I've ever used, and it actually does a whole lot. With a wildly high refresh rate, an OLED panel, and a whole slew of extra features, this really does tick a lot of boxes. Now not all is perfect, but let me take you through my setup and review of this monitor. I'll be talking about the specs, features, productivity, PC gaming, and not that you'd really buy it for this, I am going to touch on console gaming as well. So here's a review of the 49-inch Samsung G9 OLED from someone who's never used a super ultra wide before. But jumping right into the specs of this monitor, since honestly it's quite literally insane how far monitors have come. Now not everybody cares about super ultra wide or even ultra wide by itself, but what we have here is a 49-inch OLED display, which is just about two 27-inch 1440p monitors combined. And typically for myself, I usually only use one single monitor, so something like this gives me the best of both worlds for one monitor with all this display. And this is an OLED panel of course, so in terms of colors and vibrancy, this will simply be unmatched. And if you plan on using this outside of gaming, the PPI of 113 is actually super sharp, so reading text or spreadsheets turns out perfectly legible, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. And if you are going to be gaming on here like myself, you're definitely going to dig that 240Hz refresh rate alongside AMD FreeSync Pro. Not to mention it has HDR 400 if that's something you care about. But with the specs out of the way, I do want to jump into PC gaming, and I have to say this monitor is pretty nuts. Would I personally main this monitor? Not actually, and I will tell you why, but for a lot of people, this is definitely the perfect monitor. And I will say going into this review, I was very skeptical, but it turns out I was actually super wrong. But jumping into games like Forza Horizon 5 off the bat, it's actually pretty badass. The simple span of this while gaming provides a unique gaming experience, especially when you're driving first person. Now, if you are going to be using this for some sort of racing sim, you're probably going to want something a little bit more curved, but as cliche as it sounds, it's actually super immersive while gaming either way. What actually took me by surprise was the scaling of games that aren't supported by the 32:9 aspect ratio. And trust me, I know you're buying this for that super fat aspect ratio, but let's be realistic, you might be throwing down some unsupported games on here. Of course, my go-to FPS like Overwatch was a pleasant surprise for me since it actually plays far better than I expected. I'm still Grandmaster ranked whenever I'm playing competitive, except I'm one tricking Lifeweaver. I don't know why the fuck I'm doing this to myself, but so far so good. The one thing about this game is that it does only support 21:9, but it still looks good. And compared to other monitors, I will say the resolution actually keeps a sharp image despite the larger panel. Even other games like Hogwarts Legacy look absolutely beautiful on a panel like this, and it's hard not to appreciate the span of this display. And I'm not sure if it's Nvidia's DLSS or something, but my super tired RTX 2070 still gives me high refresh on this monitor. And for my viewers that still play Diablo 4, I'm actually quite enjoying Season 1. For me, it's a play it or don't situation, and for now, I'm enjoying my Druid with its companion build. And like Overwatch, this is another game that reverts back to a 21:9 aspect ratio, similar to a 34-inch ultra-wide, so if you're thinking about unsupported games, you're still definitely covered. And fun fact, despite Red Dead Redemption 2 being my favorite game of all time, I've actually never played Red Dead Redemption 1, so I am looking forward to the remaster coming out this fall. And roast me all you want, I am a console gamer, so I definitely had to make sure it works well on this monitor, and it does incredibly well. And in this case, I'm using my PlayStation 5, and by default, it does stretch out to this wacky ass 32:9 aspect ratio, which is obviously unsupported. So all I had to do was actually just use the settings to force a 16:9 aspect ratio. And boom, now you have a 27-inch 1440p monitor. And the great thing is, this fully supports all those features you'd expect for your PlayStation 5, like HDR, ALLM, VRR, and of course the 120Hz refresh rate. I did spend a fair amount of time blasting 12-year-olds on Call of Duty, and I still got absolutely zoinked. These cracked ass kids have like 16 hours a day to play. I have like 10 minutes, okay? But really, if you are a lot better than I am, you'll have absolutely no issues playing console games on here. The 0.03 millisecond response time on here is practically instant and indiscernible to somebody like me. In that case, I'm positive you'll pop off. So if you are one of those people that want to buy this for productivity but still only do console gaming, this is still an incredible option for you. And similar to PC, anything HDR will look incredible on here. Cyberpunk 2077 is always my go-to to check this out, and even God of War Ragnarok looks absolutely insane. So regardless of what you're playing on, using an OLED display is simply a pleasure. Now, if we are talking about all those other features, there's so much more this monitor can do, even if it's not hooked up to a PC. And just like Samsung Smart TVs, this has an integrated smart hub, which is controlled by this dope ass remote. Honestly, I've been spoiled by remotes. All monitors should have a remote. You've got all the available apps like Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime, but let's pretend like you don't have a console or a PC for whatever reason. This impressively has an Xbox Game Pass app where you can annihilate your enemies and Peppa Pig. Would I really use this? Absolutely not, but it's still nice to have in niche situations. You can pair your controller and headset over Bluetooth if you want to, or simply use one of the USB ports on the back end. And speaking of ports, that sort of brings me over to productivity, which I will get into, but you've got 3 Type-C ports, a display port, a regular HDMI, alongside this wacky ass micro HDMI. Simply put, this confuses the hell out of me. I'd much prefer a USB Type-C port for the laptop connection and charging, especially since the power supply is so thick. And for myself, my most used case for this monitor is not actually gaming, but more so geared towards productivity, which is why it pains me that there's no Type-C display port for my work laptop. Either way, I can still hook it up through HDMI, and while I won't get a full 240 Hz, the screen estate alone is a huge reason to get this. Working in multi-window support is just about unmatched, so depending on who you are, this might be the monitor for you. For stuff like web browsing and watching media too, you've got so many different ways to arrange your windows and get stuff done. I will say the speaker setup on here is simply okay. It is a dual 5-watt speaker setup, so anything like calls or maybe music are fine. For anything else, you're probably going to want to get a headset. And low-key, one of my favorite features on every monitor is picture by picture. If you are working on something but do want to throw down a gaming session real quick, you can do that super easily simply by splitting the monitor in 2. Easy desk setup gains. But with all of these features in mind, I do kind of wish that whole smart hub simply wasn't there. It could be because I place more value in simplicity, but the annoyance for me is that there's no way to change the input on the remote, and you do have to go to the homepage every single time. But outside of all of that, when it comes down to how this monitor looks, it's actually pretty aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't scream gamer by any means, but it does look good. The front end is rather minimal with insanely thin bezels. Not to mention, even for a big ass monitor like this, it doesn't extend halfway out your desk. For my setup, this is about 9 inches from the wall or the back of my desk, which is perfect. Now, if you do want to gamerize this a bit, you do have the RGB lighting on the back end of the monitor, but it isn't too noticeable even in a dark room. Either way, it is a nice to have feature. One thing you can do as well is sync this to whatever is on your display. For cable management, you do have this tiny little spot through the center of the stand, which is definitely a must have. And typically I am team monitor arm, so I would normally put a monitor like this on a mount. In this case, I didn't really think it was necessary since the stand itself is pretty unobtrusive. If you are going to do this, the monitor is actually pretty lightweight at 28 pounds, so it'll definitely work with more monitor arms than not. Just be sure to use this vase adapter that comes in the box to get this going. For this though, I can say I was actually pretty surprised considering how skeptical I was going in. I will be honest though, at the $2,200 price point, not having a Type-C display port for my laptop is a bit of a deal breaker. Mainly since Type-C docks don't seem to handle 32:9 aspect ratios, for Mac at least. My Windows laptop does work fine. If anybody has a suggestion on how to get 32:9 to work on my Mac through a dock, I'll buy you a wheel of cheese. I won't really. For everything else on this monitor, consider me pleased. This monitor is super expensive, super over the top, and for some people, it's perfect. Thanks for watching. Until next time.